Hi, I'm John Morse, State Senator from Colorado Springs and currently the Senate Majority Leader in the Colorado State Senate. Today I want to talk a little bit about our higher education system and what Senator Josh Penry, the Senate Minority Leader, and I are trying to do to save it. We've gotten lots of questions because people are already talking about that we're going to let schools raise tuition without state oversight. First, we don't know for sure that that's going to happen. Second, what it will be is a high tuition, high aid kind of model if we can figure out how to make it work. So that even when tuition goes up for the wealthier families, it'll stay low and affordable for the lower income families. That's our goal, but we've got to figure out a way to increase revenue for the higher education institutions. And the reason for that is because we're going to be cutting states' support to the schools. We're not going to have much choice but to do that over the next 2 or 3 years, and I'll get into that in just a second. But the institutions of higher education throughout the state really have 3 sources of revenue. The first is student aid that comes from the federal government. The second is state aid that comes from the Colorado General Fund. And the third is tuition. Well, federal aid is probably going to go up a little bit, but that's only for lower income students. The state funding is going to go down, which we'll talk about here in just a second, and so the only other leg in that triangle is tuition, and so it's probably going to have to give some in order to make up the difference that we're going to have to cut out of state appropriations. I have in my hand, and I will link on the website, or on the Facebook page, that you can see the latest forecast from the Office of Legislative Counsel about what's going to happen to state revenues over the next couple of years. And if you go to the 3rd page of it, there is a chart that it shows. And if you look at line 18 and again line 23, you will see the cliff that we're facing. So this year we actually started with a budget of almost $7.5 billion, which we're having to reduce to $7 billion. Next year we'll have to reduce that to $6.2 billion, and the year after that, $5.8 billion. So really our spending hasn't been at a level of 5.8, I think, since the early 2000s when we had a whole lot fewer school kids, a whole lot fewer prisoners, and a lot fewer people being covered by Medicaid. So that squeeze effect is really going to mean that the current year's funding of $651 million for higher education is going to drop. And I'm afraid over the next 2 or 3 years, it'll drop close enough to zero that for all practical purposes it will be zero. So that means that's why the state funding is going away for higher education, and so we've got to increase the federal funding, which we have no control over, and we're going to have to permit tuition probably to float up, which we do have some control over. But the challenge is, and what Josh Penry and I are committed to do, is to make sure that even when tuition goes up, affordability doesn't become an issue, because we're going to make sure that the low and middle class students can keep up with those increases. So hopefully that answers some of your questions. Feel free to visit my website at senatorjohnmorse.com. Send me an email with questions, comments, or concerns at john@senatorjohnmorse.com, or fan me on Facebook. Thanks for taking the time.